So what does Susan Rice know about the accusation that she's behind the attempt to unmask Trump officials? I bet it's nothing.
I know nothing about this. I was surprised to see reports from Chairman Nunes on that count today. I really don't know to what Chairman Nunes was referring. I was not aware of any orders given to disseminate that kind of information. But the fact is that the president did request back in December the intelligence community compile all of the information that it had on what had transpired during the campaign.
So she's unaware of orders, but she knew of the request. Sneaky little ploy. I'm going to try that this weekend. Officer, I didn't order the drugs. I just requested them. But this is pure Rice. Remember, she's the one who blamed Benghazi on a video. Now she's pulling a Sergeant Schultz. She sees nothing. She knows nothing. Maybe she can blame her amnesia on an episode of Hogan's Heroes. Did she leak the names?
Did you leak the name of Mike Flynn?
I leaked nothing to nobody, and never have and never would.
She leaked nothing to nobody. A double negative. She either leaked everything to everyone, or maybe she just misspoke. Again, this woman is crafty. But did she break the law? Well, incidental collection is legal. We all know this. When you surveil a foreigner, but then you get picked up too. But it could also be reverse monitoring. They say they're recording Igor, but they really want you instead. Igor is just the wingman. Now, if you combine reverse monitoring with unmasking, you can mess with just about everyone. It may still be legal, but it's not cool. Now, others will prefer to raise hell over Russian collusion. Raise away. But be aware that in the evidence sweepstakes, the leak story is on firmer ground, while the collusion stuff still remains foggy. These two stories are like the Yankees and the Red Sox. Everyone's wildly devoted to their team and hates the other. Meanwhile, we lose sight of the truly deadly threat, those who see you and me as stepping stones to 72 virgins. That's a collection that's far from incidental and way more final. Well, thank you, Dana.
Oh, you're welcome.
She just said it was a good monologue. But I will start with Kimberly instead. Nice try. Kimberly?
Ladybug lasagna, everybody.
Yes.
Sounds good.
Did she do nothing wrong? Should she go to jail for many years?
Well, I think
right?
you figured it out. You solved this the puzzle here. You cracked the Da Vinci Code, because it was either she leaked everything to everyone, or I don't know. But she was crafty, because of course she did not admit in this interview that in fact that she leaked classified information, which would be the criminal act. She said, okay, it didn't deny the unmasking, but she didn't take it a step further, obviously. So if she goes in front of the House and Senate committees, what's she going to do? She's going to take the fifth. That's what I think is going to happen here.
Dana, was she just being crafty, to quote the Beastie Boys, or was she abusing her power?
Well, the thing that was pretty amazing is in that interview with Andrea Mitchell doesn't use that clip that you showed at first.
Right.
Which was just a month ago, Susan Rice saying that she knew nothing about it. But now she's like, okay, well, yes, of course, I was doing in the course of my work.
Right.
I was doing that. I do think this, if you go back to even Nunes and Schiff, who have seen the documents in question, we have not, but they've seen them, and they said that the collection that was in itself wasn't illegal. But you're exactly right. The part I liked about the monologue the most was when you said, if you're in a race to see who is going to be able to win this, if you're on a side here, then you're like, well, then obviously today, if you support Trump, you're like, well, there's that. Obviously, she did something. There's probably going to be more to this story, and we're going to have to find out because she's not only going to have to testify in front of them, but it's plausible that in the FBI investigation, they know of this as well.
I think so.
Probably.
Yes.
Eric, do you believe that this was a political motivated?
I think this is far bigger than we're even making it out right now. Yesterday I said my head was exploding. I said where there's smoke, there's fire, and that this fire is leading right to Susan Rice. My problem is I think this is it's going to continue to expand. There's no way that this is limited solely to Mike Flynn and maybe a couple other Trump operatives. I will bet you this thing continues, like pull layers of the onion, you'll see more and more. Problem is when it goes beyond that, is it incidental or is it targeted? I don't know. But right now we have incidental, okay? Then she says, no, I didn't leak it. Well, somewhere between this, her demanding for the unmasking of this name and the name being in the media, somewhere a felony was committed. Now, was it her? I don't know. Was it someone around her? Could be. She has a lot of explaining to do. And then this one. Why is a White House staffer, Susan Rice, demanding the unmasking of this name when the NSA, the FBI, and the CIA all had access to the information, and none of them chose to unmask Flynn's name and others' names because it didn't seem like it was important enough. What was it about Susan Rice, other than her proximity to the president, that made it so darn important to unmask these people's names? Think about it.
She's a key player. She's in her circle, just like Benghazi.
And
Went out there on the Sunday
show. The
show.
national security advisor that wanted something to do with it.
All right, Bob. But the NSA, the FBI, and CIA kept the names under mask under U.S. persons.
It doesn't really matter. It's too bad they did. When you mention these things, you say two sides,
right?
Who leaked what and who leaked another, and the Russian issue.
Yes.
That Russian scandal, if it bears out, is the largest single crime against the United States ever committed by a foreign country.
If.
And that means
and you're ignoring the question. The question is,
are you practicing this interruption every time I talk?
But Bob, this is what you do.
You're the one who just said that.
You changed the topic.
Well,
the topic was Susan Rice basically
I can change whatever
lying
I want.
13 days ago. Okay, fine.
Talking about
Fair
your
enough.
tweet
I thought we'd have
again.
an intelligent discussion about this.
The point is this. She did not, she said she didn't leak it. She said she unmasked it. And one of the things that should happen, I'm sorry they didn't unmask more of it. At this point, everybody knew that the Russians, there were facts and rumors about Russian involvement in our presidential election. Of course they should have unmasked everybody or anybody.
But why, Bob, do you think she said 3 weeks ago that she knew nothing about this?
Well, she did. I think she was referring to not leaking it. But
no,
that's not what she said.
I'll read exactly what she said.
Question.
I was surprised to see the reports from Chairman Nunes on that account today. I know nothing about this.
Lying.
But now we know she demanded the names unmasked.
What was she talking about? What was Nunes talking about?
The unmasking.
Is that what he went to see Clinton about?
Yes.
Yes.
That was. How do we know that?
I think that's fact, Bob.
I mean, Bob,
that is like he saw them because a couple people were unmasked. It is unrelated.
13 days ago, she said she had no knowledge of any of this happening, and then now we know
the one that ordered it.
that she demanded these names be unmasked. There's a blatant lie.
This is like ABC.
Well, blatant lies. I noticed that the Trump campaign had somebody do a former military guy do a back channel to Putin for Trump. Did you notice that story? We didn't leave
about
that.
the back channels to Iran, Bob? Why is it okay for Obama to meddle?
Because this is talking about messing with the presidential election, which I'm convinced.
And we've never done that with Israel, right?
What?
We never sent any money to help beat Netanyahu?
It's not a question of sending money. It's a question of leaking false information about Hillary Clinton.
And there's no question that the Russians were probably involved in that. But is there collusion? You're on right now. It's a speculative fog. We don't know. We don't have. We have to. We need an investigation. I'm with you, Bob, on the investigation.
Bob, she lied about this. Who cares? Who cares?
They lie all the time.
Hold on.
There we go.
She was the right hand of President Obama, demanding this name of a Trump operative to be unmasked, likely. Who knows? Maybe legally, who knows? But definitely illegally leaked to the
President of the United States lied about being.
Here's the problem.
Trump lies all the time. You're worried about Susan Rice.
What about the next one? What about the next name that makes it out to the media?
What about it?
Then what are you going to say?
So what?
So what? She's breaking the law.
No, but he doesn't care.
Someone is breaking the law.
President of the United States who lied himself about being tapped, and you let that go, and you're worried about Susan Rice, whose reputation is being besmirched by you guys because you're trying to get the focus off of Russia because you know and I know that the Trump campaign,
we have a lot more evidence that Susan Rice lied in this who unmasked and who leaked than we do of any collusion of the Trump campaign with the Russians. So this one holds a hell of a lot more weight right now than this one.
That investigation on the Trump and the Russian collusion has gone back months and months and months.
And what were they able to find?
They're still working on it, which means there's something there.
Okay, well, Bob, they've produced no evidence whatsoever.
Unlike
and by the way, there's no indicia whatsoever that this actually influenced and affected the outcome of the election.
You know?
Was there any vote tampering? Was there any involvement in that way?
The story about sending out those untrue press releases in Wisconsin to small newspapers could matter.
Bob, leaking.
If you know something about politics, you understand that.
Leaking Flynn's name is a felony. Someone leaked Flynn's name.
He's a felon.
Bob, someone committed a felony. We know that for a fact. Okay? Why don't we find out who did it instead of trying to hide and say,
the President of the United States fired him because he committed a felony. Did he not? Did he not go and ask for immunity for prosecution and they turned him down? Why? You think he wasn't a felon?
He didn't commit the felony. Someone committed the felony by leaking General Flynn's name. That's fact.
Man, names get leaked all the time.
All right. Here's Rice. This is her on another show denying political motivation. Let's roll that, please.
This is not anything political has been alleged. The allegation is that somehow Obama administration officials utilized intelligence for political purposes. That's absolutely false.
Did you seek the names of people involved in, to unmask the names of people involved in the Trump transition, the Trump campaign, people surrounding the president-elect?
Let me be clear.
In order to spy on them, in order to expose them?
Absolutely not for any political purposes.
Dana?
Well, I think that might be eventually where she ends up figuring out some sort of a way to explain herself. So she might say, well, it wasn't for political purposes. It was maybe because in the collection you had two Russians who are monitored. Okay? Two Russians who were talking about somebody like Mike Flynn. Does that raise alarm bells if you think he's the incoming national security advisor? Do they have thoughts about how they're going to try to do something to him? And would you unmask? I mean, there's lots of ways, I suppose, in any scenario that she might be able to try to explain that. But it doesn't make sense. But then how, if you go back to that New York Times piece, it was a couple of months ago that said that the Obama administration was planting little breadcrumbs all around in order to make sure that investigators or the press eventually could find it, their way back to this. I think that's the big question for me. Is
Dana,
how did she do that?
She said herself that the Obama administration ordered any information having to do with Russia and the elections, all the collection you could possibly make. If it were up to me, I would have tapped all of them myself, because I absolutely firmly believe the Russians helped Donald Trump get elected president. But she already said, and the administration and Trump knew it, because Obama and Trump talked about it.
That's true.
They did talk about it, and they knew that there was an active investigation by the FBI, which is still going on, which wouldn't be for a red light violation.
Can you explain one question? Why would,
I don't need to explain anything.
I'm asking, under your theory, if the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA are directed to do exactly this, if there's any collusion between any U.S. person and the Russians and anything going on, it's their job to unearth that and investigate that and find out what's going on.
Yes.
Why would an Obama appointee, a staffer, Susan Rice, demand these people's names be open if the FBI, CIA, and NSA didn't need that?
No evidence and no evidence of wrongdoing.
She was not doing her job.
What are you talking about?
She
There's
didn't
only one
leak it.
reason why
we don't know if she leaked it. You have no information about that.
There's no other reason. What? She wasn't going to perform. The White House does not perform investigations. They don't do that.
No, but she did was she disseminated it out among those people who do. And secondly,
that's illegal.
Yeah, but guess what, Bob? This was virtually guaranteeing that the information was going to be leaked, because she went ahead, despite the fact that these agencies found no evidence of wrongdoing, and
no, that's not right.
And ordered them to produce detailed transcripts and records of legal phone calls.
They haven't even issued their reports yet.
They're the ones who masked them.
Yeah, the FBI is deep in this investigation, and believe me, before this is over. You think they've been doing this for 7 months for fun?
Oh,
you don't think they have anything?
What does that mean? Here's what I know. I know the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA all knew General Flynn's name when it was masked by them. It was unmasked by Susan Rice for political reasons.
You want to touch the Blackwater consultant who was paid by their campaign to set up a channel.
I know.
You don't want to talk about that? You want to talk about Susan Rice? As opposed to some hack son of a...
All right. You know, the longer this silliness endures, the more Putin wins. America is like is a couple quarreling in public. We're quarreling about it. You have the collusion.
Oh, I do not do that.
Yeah, it's the worst thing. Who wins? It's the cad, Putin, off in the corner.
Your look is worse.
So far.
He thinks it's hilarious.
Joining me now for his thoughts, Dr. Charles Krauthammer, nationally syndicated columnist and, of course, a Fox News contributor. Charles, what did you make of the developments today? Last week we had the news that Michael Flynn would be offering to testify in exchange for immunity. That got wall-to-wall media coverage. This is actually a very significant development, sort of downplayed in some quarters. What did you make of it?
Well, you're right about the downplaying. The networks have essentially ignored it. I think in the New York Times it appeared on page A16, and the reason is they're not interested, the mainstream media and the Democrats, that's sort of redundant, are not interested in this line of inquiry. They only want to talk about the collusion story, which is a legitimate story or allegations, although there's been no evidence to date. They are not interested in this story about the improper use of intelligence, which is equally important, and it's worth investigating. I think the problem for Rice is, number one, that she appears to be totally contradicting herself. when she said a couple of weeks ago, I know nothing about this. It appears to be an outright lie and contradiction. I suspect she'll wiggle around it by being ambiguous about the word, what the word this was, very Clintonian. It depends what is. So on that, she can probably escape. But the other issue is, why was she asking? And what possible national security interest did she have in uncovering whatever names she uncovered, unmasked? And I think until we have answers to that, we're not going to know the extent of this impropriety. If it was for national security reasons, possible, I don't quite see how that would be, then this is perfectly legitimate. But she is not an investigator. She's a political operative. She works on behalf of the president. And if it can be shown that this was a political fishing expedition, then she is in a world of hurt.
The way we've seen this story unfold is that every day, if you're on one side of this or the other, on any given day, you can feel like your side is winning. But what is the national toll on the psyche of the American people that really want to see some things get done, or maybe if you're in the resist movement, you want to see some things get blocked? But if this is the thing we're talking about, and Catherine just said, we're looking at another year to 18 months of this, what does that do to the American people's trust in the system?
I think that's one of the casualties. The other casualty is it's not just what's happening in Congress, what may or may not get passed. The world around us is in deep trouble. We've got craziness in North Korea. We've got the Chinese sort of on the march in the South China Sea. The Russians are on the march all the time. We have these atrocities in Syria, and yet we seem to be now accommodating ourselves to the regime that just committed the atrocity. And of course, we have Iran extending its influence all throughout the Middle East. The world is on fire, and we are chasing rabbit holes here. I'm not sure that we're going to find anything of importance on the collusion issue. Yes, of course the Russians intervened. But on collusion, what's the evidence? And what exactly would it mean for there to have been collusion? And as to the impropriety of the releases, I suspect we will find one or two instances. I suspect also this is just a guess, since we really don't know. But the idea of a vast conspiracy is pretty unlikely. You and I have been here for many, many years, and I always assume that is incompetence and not conspiracy, because if you believe in conspiracy, you're giving these guys too much credit. If they couldn't organize a two-car funeral.
I have to say, when they used to accuse President Bush of all sorts of things, I thought they give us way too much credit for thinking
exactly.
of that.
Anybody who's been on the inside knows that conspiracies are extremely rare and very difficult to pull off.
Thank you, Dr. Krauthammer. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right.
Continue now with our lead story. Did National Security Advisor Susan Rice spy on the Trump campaign and transition team? Joining us from Washington, Congressman Peter King, member of the House Intelligence Committee, and Senator James Lankford, a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Now, letters have been circulating demanding that Ambassador Rice come in and testify in front of both your committees. Senator, we begin with you. How do you assess the situation so far? Say 10 is the most serious story, 1 is the least serious. Where is this?
I would say it's pretty high, close to a 10, because the accusation as it sits out there is that the Obama administration and people within the Obama administration were using their office and access to official documents to get access to then political accusations. This is the same accusation that was flying around with the IRS, for instance, that the IRS was using their tools for political purposes to be able to silence conservatives. If we get close to the campaign time period and they're using official documents, classified documents at that, to either release names, that's obviously a legal issue, to target individuals that are American citizens that were masked, that's called reverse targeting. But when you say you're targeting people internationally, but actually using that to be able to target American citizens, that's not legal, or to be able to use any official document for political purposes. Those are all serious.
Now, you heard Malia Zimmerman say that the track that she's on with Adam Housley is that it was a political play, just as you are concerned about. But if Susan Rice comes before your committee, I can almost guarantee she's going to take the 5th senator.
not going to answer your questions. So
we still need to ask the questions and be able to walk through, and we'll have a voluntary reach out to be able to go to her. We don't want to raise it to a level of subpoena unless you absolutely have to, but we've got a lot of witnesses that were in the process. So far, all the witnesses we've requested have voluntarily agreed to be able to meet with us. We would hope that she would as well.
Okay, but she needs to be under oath, Congressman King, for it to really mean anything.
Absolutely.
Do you expect that the House is going to regressively pursue that?
I am certain they will. We'll have to ask Chairman Nunes to be certain, but I am actually confident that he will. This, as Jim Langford said, that if all or even most of these charges that are out there, or accusations out there against Susan Rice are true, this does rise to a level of a very high scandal, because it's such an abuse of privacy. It, I believe, violates the law, and it really is undermining the presidency of the United States, whether it's Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. This is just something that cannot be allowed. So again, we don't know yet, but based on some very reliable sources, these are very, very serious charges that she has to answer. And by the way, they follow logically what Devin Nunes has been saying for the last 2 weeks.
Now, do you expect your colleagues in the Democratic Party on the House Intel Committee to agree with you, Congressman, that this has to be done in a way that's methodical so the American people know the truth, or do you expect obstruction?
I think there will be some obstruction. They will accuse us of trying to deflect the issue away from Russia, but we're going to go ahead with it. We have to go ahead with it. And to me, listen, I'm one of those who believes we have to examine the Russian issue as far as we possibly can, but also this. And right now, to me, there's more say credible accusations, if you will, on the side against Susan Rice than there are against President Trump when it comes to Russia.
All right. Now, do you see it in the Senate as being an obstructionist thing on the Senate Intel Committee, or do you think they're going to cooperate?
I think they'll cooperate. We have really locked arms throughout this investigation from the very beginning, which was for us months ago in the starting, that we agreed we're going to go where the facts go. And we don't know where those facts are going to go, but when you do research, we've got to be able to pull original documents and sources, talk to people that were originally involved in the investigation, pull as many people out as we can to be able to get their personal testimony, but let the facts lead us through it, not let partisanship lead us through it.
But it's going to be hard because I can, a lot of people disagree with me that Ambassador Rice will take the fifth, but I think she will. Now, Senator, when you heard her on March 22nd say she didn't know anything about any Trump surveillance, and then changed a little bit to nuance that, yeah, I was interested for this reason, telling NBC that raise anything, or do you think that's just a natural answer?
I think that's a natural answer. I think the bigger issue is to be able to press some of these issues. When she said she didn't leak anything, you've obviously got to ask why were these names so important to the National Security Advisor. Obviously the FBI, some of those folks I can understand in a criminal investigation or a background, but to the National Security Advisor, why is it important? How many staff around her were receiving that, and was she aware any of the staff around her were leaking it? Her question was very specific. I didn't do it, and what you need to know is how many places did that information go after it was unmasked.
Okay, one more question for you, Congressman. As I mentioned, the White House gets a briefing every morning from the intel agencies. Have you ever heard of a National Security Advisor taking this kind of an interest for more than a year in a campaign or a transition or anything like that? You've been around a while. Have you ever heard of anything like that?
Bill, I think it's very unusual for a National Security Advisor to take this type of interest at all. It may happen occasionally, but to me, that's not her job. She's not an investigator. She's not a cop. She's not an FBI agent. That's their job. Her job is to set policy. So if this is what people are saying it is, this is totally unusual and I think totally wrong and inappropriate. And if we're talking about veracity here, remember, our first impression of Susan Rice and our lasting impression was when she went on all the shows to say that a video was the source of the Benghazi attack.
But I don't think that's fair here, because this is a different situation, and I know that she was embarrassed by that. She had to be.
Well, she's embarrassed because she got caught.
Again, you're assigning a motive to her. I can't, but she does have a history there, but I don't know if we should prejudge this.
I'm not prejudging. I'm just saying that when you're factoring in everything, you also consider prior statements and prior conduct.
Okay, and that's true. Gentlemen, thanks very much. Please keep us posted. If you get anything, please let us know. Our audience is very, very interested in this story.
Thank you, Bill.
Here we go in the news out of Syria. Fox's alert a suspected chemical weapons attack killing dozens in northern Syria. We warn you, some of this video, it's graphic, it's disturbing. One activist group reports at least 58 are dead, including several children. Kitty Logan picks up the story from London with more. And what have you learned, Kitty?
Bill, well, if this is confirmed, it could turn out to be the worst attack of its kind in 6 years of fighting in Syria. It happened early this morning in the northern province of Idlib, and the video we're seeing coming out of the town of Khan Sheikhoun shows the injured in hospital struggling to breathe. Patients are hooked up to ventilators, doctors frantically trying to save lives. One monitoring group, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, says many of the victims were seen choking or fainting, and doctors treating those affected say the symptoms do indicate a gas attack. Now, sadly, many children were caught up in this. 11 of the dead are said to be under 8 years old, and there's also dozens of people seriously wounded, and doctors saying now they're struggling to treat all of the victims with limited medical resources available, and many injured patients may not survive. Now, there's no information yet on what chemical was used, but judging by the video we're seeing, it has a devastating effect so far. Now, this attack happened in an area under opposition control. Now, many people fled to Idlib from Aleppo when that city fell to government forces. So there are hundreds of thousands displaced there and many, many rebel fighters. So Syrian forces do continue to attack that area from the air despite a ceasefire. Now, activists claim a chemical agent was dropped in some of those airstrikes today. But the UN says it will be investigating a chemical weapons watchdog says that investigation has already begun. Bill.
It's all so disturbing. Kitty Logan, the latest on what we're learning out of Syria from London. Follow up now on that story out of Syria. A moment ago, President Trump putting a statement out from the White House on that deadly attack, the chemical attack in Syria, blaming the Assad regime for what the president calls heinous actions. Activists claim either Syrian or Russian fighter jets dropped chemical weapons on a rebel town in northern Syria. A human rights group reports the attack killed at least 58, including 11 children. The president's statement a moment ago reads the following, quote, "Today's chemical attack in Syria against innocent people, including women and children, is reprehensible and cannot be ignored by the civilized world. These heinous actions by the Bashar al-Assad regime are a consequence of the past administration's weakness and irresolution. President Obama said in 2012 that he would establish a, quote, red line against the use of chemical weapons and then did nothing. The United States stands with our allies across the globe to condemn this intolerable attack." That is the statement from the president at the White House just a moment ago. More updates on this story as we get the developments here at the Fox News channel.
Investigators now confirming the identity of the homicide bomber in yesterday's deadly attack on a subway in St. Petersburg, Russia. Authorities say he's a 22-year-old Russian citizen born in the former Soviet Republic of Kyrgyzstan. That he may have also had links to radical Islamic groups. That is under investigation. For more, I'm joined by Michael Balboni, the former Homeland Security Advisor for New York State. Michael, I know that as Homeland Security Advisor, you dealt a lot with investigative agencies in Russia, correct?
Well, one of the things that we've always looked at is whenever something has happened over there, we try to work, obviously, through the federal government and our sources there, specifically the FBI, to understand what is going on over there. And as you know, the New York City Police Department, among others, have developed a capability for immediate information that comes back after an attack like this. What's crucial, John, as you know, is what are the similarities to attacks that have happened before? What does it mean for the United States? And in this case, it's obviously going back to the target that they've gone back so many times, which is a subway system, a transportation system, using a suicide attack using an explosive. So these are things obviously raising lots and lots of concerns for any part of the world that has a subway system.
Yeah, it's believed that something like 7,000 Russian fighters have gone to Syria and actually taken up arms there and then gone back to one of the Russian republics. This guy might be one of them. We don't know yet. But what does that lesson hold for the United States?
Well, what's interesting about this individual, that the profile that is coming out, that here's an individual from Kyrgyzstan, as you mentioned before. They've seen that country has seen 500 of their residents go over to try to fight with ISIS. In addition to which, the Boston Marathon bombers also came from that part of the world. Yeah. So you wonder if there's some synergies there. But the big question here is, did this individual have help? Was this, in fact, an ISIS-sponsored, a Chechen-sponsored? Because that's the part of this world that we don't really necessarily understand at this point in time was the motivation to attack this as a result of a protest of what's gone on in Chechnya, and given the fact that Vladimir Putin was in the city earlier that day, or is it just part of a campaign that ISIS has waged against Russia?
But it's, happening an awful long way from the United States, yes, obviously, and there are a lot of Americans who say, pardon me, that's a tragic thing, and right, we pray for those who were wounded or killed, but Vladimir Putin or whomever may have brought this kind of thing on himself. What do you say to Americans about the danger that this kind of attack represents?
We live in a world that is truly a global society, and so what happens overseas, it would be almost security malpractice to not take a look at, could this inspire somebody else here in the United States? This is not a terribly sophisticated attack. Even the device that was unexploded, yes, it was clever. It was in a fire extinguisher, but nonetheless, it was designed to go off basically around the same time. Is that something that you could do here? The question is, yes, as we've seen just recently in New York City, the Chelsea bombings, indicated that somebody was going to place multiple devices in multiple areas to maximize the damage. Well, that's the type of tradecraft that this individual demonstrated. So could he be inspiring somebody else? Always a concern in the United States.
Yeah, the Boston Marathon bombings still fresh in our minds. Mm-hmm. Michael Balboni. Michael, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. The Trump surveillance story explodes. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. Tonight we'll give you just the facts. No speculation, no hysteria. The latest from Fox News correspondents Adam Housley and Malia Zimmerman is this, quote, multiple sources tell Fox News that Susan Rice, former national security advisor under then-President Barack Obama, requested to unmask the names of Trump transition officials caught up in surveillance, unquote. Apparently, Ms. Rice was doing this for more than a year leading up to the November election. That's very troubling. And if it can be proven, Susan Rice is in major trouble. Also, because the national security advisor was so close to President Obama, he's going to have to answer questions as well. So you can see an enormous story is developing, and it really doesn't matter whether the liberal mainstream media ignores it. Congress and the FBI will not. To be fair to Ms. Rice, and we do want to do that, she denies all wrongdoing and should be given the presumption of innocence, because that's the American way.
There were occasions when I would receive a report in which a U.S. person was referred to, name not provided, just U.S. person. And sometimes in that context, in order to understand the importance of the report and assess its significance, it was necessary to find out or request the information as to who that U.S. official was.
Did you seek the names of people involved in, to unmask the names of people involved in the Trump transition, the Trump campaign, people surrounding the president-elect?
Let me be clear.
In order to spy on them, in order to expose them?
Absolutely not for any political purposes, to spy, expose, anything. But
Did you leak the name of Mike Flynn?
I leaked nothing to nobody.
Nothing to nobody should be nothing to anyone. Now, here's my question. If Susan Rice did surveil the Trump people, big if, for a year, what was her motive? Why did she do it? I mean, think about it. This woman is a national security advisor to the president. She's got a lot of work to do. So why would she be running over to the National Security Agency or the CIA reviewing wiretaps? Summations of all intelligence are delivered to the White House every morning. And why, if a Trump person was involved, would she want the name? The key question to this big story is motivation. Now, I know many cable news programs will speculate, will convict Susan Rice without a trial, or attempt to cover for her, as we saw last night. But we at The Factor are not going to do that. We're in business to report the truth and give opinion based upon facts. So let's sum up. Talking Points believes the reporting from Adam Housley and Malia Zimmerman is accurate. Other news agencies are getting information as well. So at this point, you, the viewer, can assume that Susan Rice took an amazing interest in what the Trump people were doing well before the folks voted. Why did she do that? We don't know. What we do know is that both the House and Senate Intelligence Committees should subpoena Susan Rice immediately. And both committees should send written questions to President Obama. Also, the FBI should interview Ambassador Rice and conduct a very thorough investigation of her behavior. That's reasonable, is it not? Because if the Trump campaign or the Trump transition team were spied upon by the Obama administration, again, a big if, that has to be uncovered. And that's a memo.
Well, there's something at the last election that seems to have driven otherwise rational people into dark and embarrassing places. Barack Obama's twin electoral victories are supposed to have changed everything and put an end to the paranoid style of American politics. Obama was touted as living proof, as he himself often noted, that the arc of history bends towards something awesome, likely the permanent triumph of establishment liberalism, and almost everyone in Washington actually believed this was true. And then Hillary Clinton lost, proving that the rest of the country never really bought into that program. What a shock it was, and D.C. has still not recovered from it. The result, hysteria like we haven't seen here since the 1950s. Suddenly, no conspiracy is too nutty to be taken seriously as long as it pertains to Russia. No act is too improper to be excused as long as it was supposedly meant to stop Russia. Extremism in the fight against Putin is no vice, suddenly. Well, the contortions can make your head spin. Just a month ago, the media told us it was absurd to say the Trump administration was spied on Trump, rather, Obama spied on Trump. Now they're saying it would be absurd not to spy on Trump. Susan Rice's decision to unmask her political enemies, far from a crime, they're now telling us, it was routine and necessary. Well, at this point, there are at least two key questions that remain unanswered in this saga. First, did Susan Rice include the unmasked names in her presidential daily briefs for the president, President Obama? And second, did Rice or her associates leak those names to the press? Either one would be a stunning misuse of the national security apparatus. It ought to be the media's job to discover if any of that happened. But instead, they're flamboyantly not interested. Jim Sciutto, for example, CNN's chief national security correspondent, told viewers yesterday the Susan Rice story was, quote, ginned up by the right wing as, quote, a distraction. Well, of course, until 2013, Sciutto was a political appointee working for the Obama administration. He has every reason to defend his former co-workers, no matter what they do. The question is, why did CNN put him on this beat in the first place? But next, undeterred, CNN rolled out his breaking news banner to proclaim, brace yourself, that a friend of Susan Rice's had denied on background she did anything wrong. That was news. Meanwhile, anchor Don Lemon announced he wouldn't, quote, insult the intelligence of his viewers by talking about the Rice story at all. Instead, the channel is entirely committed to covering Trump's collusion with Russia, even though there remains precisely no evidence such a thing actually happened, and so on. You've seen it. It's not news coverage. It is mass delusion. And someday Washington is going to wake up from all of this hungover and ashamed. Congressman Brad Sherman of California has spent years as a champion of civil liberties. He voted against the Patriot Act, against warrantless wiretapping, against bulk data collection. So far, he has not yet commented on Rice's behavior. He joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks for coming on.
I do want to differ with you on one thing. When you use the term monitored, you make it sound like Trump's people were the target. You know, if Kislyak, the Russian ambassador, orders a pizza, they're going to listen to the pepperoni guy.
Right.
That doesn't mean they're monitoring Papa John's.
Well, they were actually monitoring Trump's associates. Whether they were the intended target of it or not is an open question. But as you know, the law allows the U.S. government to monitor American citizens when they are speaking with people from foreign countries. Again, intent is all that is up for debate, not the fact of the monitoring. But my question...
Well, the word monitoring is a little unclear. The person being monitored is the Russian ambassador or the Russian officials. Obviously, if they're talking to an American, they're going to capture the voice of the American.
Not being monitored. So if that person wasn't being monitored, then why would Susan Rice be interested in the identity of that person?
Well, you want to understand what Kislyak has to say.
The person who's not being monitored. You want to know who that person is?
Yes, because first of all, the unmasking is not just, the unmasking may not have anything to do with the voice of the American. If Kislyak is talking to Moscow about Flynn, and you want to know what is he talking about?
Right.
Which official do they think they can manipulate? Which official do they think is really smart?
I understand.
You want to know what they think.
Right, because you're monitoring that person.
No,
you're not monitoring that person, but his identity is key to understanding what you're monitoring.
Exactly.
But do you see the Orwellian path we're now trotting? You're saying these people are not actually being surveilled, but they're literally being surveilled.
If Kislyak is talking to the Kremlin about an American, the American may be asleep at the time. That's monitoring what Kislyak has to say.
But in this case, the American wasn't asleep. The American was speaking. We know in at least one case. We do, actually. We know in the case of General Mike Flynn, who was speaking, that he was monitored. And he's an American citizen.
Well, he was talking to the Russian ambassador.
Look, you can describe the motive or try and justify it, but it doesn't change the fact that he was monitored by his government without a warrant and without his knowledge. And so
look, when I talk to the Russian ambassador, I expect I'm being monitored. And if the Russian ambassador is having conversations that the CIA and FBI aren't monitoring, then why in the hell are we giving them billions of dollars?
My question, that's a separate question, the oversight of the intelligence community. But the Fourth Amendment seems to say that Americans should be immune from monitoring or surveillance or spying or whatever the term we're using without a warrant. And you went to Harvard Law School. Why is the Fourth Amendment suspended when I'm speaking to someone from a foreign country? I don't understand that.
Well, it's relatively impossible to listen to half the conversation.
Right.
If you're going, it is entirely appropriate to monitor what the Russian ambassador is doing. And if I'm on the phone with them or you're on the phone with them, they're going to hear both sides of that conversation.
So that doesn't raise any Fourth Amendment concerns for you at all?
It clearly doesn't.
Okay. So you said that when you speak to people in foreign countries, you have the expectation that you're being spied upon, monitored, surveilled, whatever, by the U.S. government, that your voice is being picked up. Hillary Clinton and her foundation staff, we know from press reports, spoke to a lot of foreign leaders who, not all of whom are allies of the United States, to put it mildly. So the expectation in that case would be those conversations were picked up by the U.S. government. What happened to them? Do you know? Do you know where
they haven't been leaked by the Trump administration.
Right.
One would expect that there are hundreds of thousands of pages worth of information collected every day, and that Hillary's name has been in them since the 90s, because the Russians have been talking to each other about Bill and Hillary Clinton since the 90s.
Okay, so this is exactly why I wanted to talk to you specifically, because I think you have been a pretty assertive voice for privacy on behalf of American citizens against their government, and yet you seem to have suspended your normal suspicion in this case because it pertains to the Trump administration and Russia.
No, I think that we've been picking up what the Russians communicate back to the Kremlin all the time. And that invariably involves American names. And one would expect that the Kremlin is talking about President Clinton, then President Bush, then President Obama all the time.
But see, what bothers me is we don't know, and as far as I know, you don't know the purpose, specifically the purpose for this surveillance. And as you know, it is not uncommon for intelligence agencies to reverse it. I want to spy on you. I can't legally, so I find out who you're speaking to abroad, and I spy on them, and thereby pick up your half of the conversation. That happens, as you well know. Would you sponsor legislation requiring intelligence agencies to explain the purpose of this surveillance before engaging in it?
When they're going to get a FISA warrant, they need to explain it. But if you are monitoring foreign officials, that's their job, especially if we're talking about hostile foreign officials, such as China and Russia.
But shouldn't they explain it? I mean, so here you have...
Yeah, I mean, it's one sentence explanation. Russia's hostile to the United States, and we're keeping track.
How about in this sense? So our government is basically ground to a halt. Our relations with a key country in the world, Russia, are on edge as the result of an investigation we know literally nothing about. We don't know its conclusions. We don't really know with any specificity its purpose. And yet all of us are proceeding as if this is normal. Why is that normal?
We need an independent investigation of whether Russia colluded with Trump to hack Hillary.
Okay.
Now, I think the first part of that has already been proven, that Russia did it. I know you disagree.
Did what exactly?
Did the hacking of the DNC and Podesta emails. Now,
is there evidence of that anywhere? I mean, have you seen, as a member of Congress and someone who's well-versed on intelligence matters, have you seen any evidence? And I know that you're skeptical of the intelligence agency. They've spied on Congress before and not been punished. Have you seen any evidence that that's true?
I may not be quite as skeptical as you. When I see Comey and Clapper and Coates all agree, all of them first appointed by Republican presidents, that conclusion is something that I'm willing to accept, because they're not going to give me, let alone anyone outside of Congress, the sources, methods, and details.
Did you read the January 6th intelligence community report on Russian spying? I'm sure that you did. Okay, so it said two things that kind of got lost in the noise. The first was, that I'm quoting now, we did not make an assessment of the impact that Russian activities had on the outcome of the 2016 election. That's the first.
I'm more qualified, you're more qualified to make that assessment. We follow politics.
But here's the second one. Judgments are not intended to imply that we have proof that shows something to be a fact. Judges are not intended to imply that we have proof that shows something to be a fact. Now, we're operating, you are operating, all of Washington is operating on the assumption that we know for certain that the Russian government hacked those two email accounts, the DNC's and Podesta's. And to this moment, not only is there no evidence, but the intel community itself says we don't necessarily have proof.
That was January. They've made
What has changed? I have not seen.
Gathering more information.
But why? Look, people's lives are being changed. Their reputation's impugned. You saw a member of the Democratic member of the Intel Committee today, Joaquin Castro, say he expects people to go to jail. People are being threatened with imprisonment, and there's still no evidence available for public view, or even your view. Why?
Well, the only person who's being impugned is Putin, and he's got many things to be impugned for. No American has been identified as engaging in any illegal behavior.
Are you kidding? Do you watch television? Every single day, people who work for Trump, and by the way, I don't know if Paul Manafort, I don't know anything about Paul Manafort. I'm merely saying these guys are being held up as Russian agents who changed the outcome of the election, and isn't it incumbent upon elected officials and the agencies to provide some proof that they did something wrong?
We need an investigation. There's no proof that any American did anything wrong.
I thought there was an investigation ongoing.
The FBI is conducting an investigation. I have, and I know you have, some concerns about Comey. I would like to see a special prosecutor or special counsel do that investigation from a Justice Department office, and we ought to also have an independent commission. This is important for us to know. We do know this. Emails were hacked, and they were significant. They were much more significant than the files stolen from the Democratic National Headquarters back in Watergate. Those we know didn't affect the election in any significant way. McGovern lost in a landslide.
We're out of time. I mean, I'd love to hear someone argue point blank that voters shouldn't have known that information. I was glad to know it before I voted.
You can beat any candidate if you can publish everything on their email. And I'm sure that if Bernie voters knew what Hillary really thought of Bernie's hairstyle, we would have lost even more votes. That kind of personal chit-chat should not be published.
Congressman Sherman, thanks for joining us tonight.
Good to be with you.